Hi, this is Mike Russos from the .NET Customer Success team, and today I'm going to talk about .NET Core tooling, just running through some useful editors, IDEs, and other tools that are worth knowing about if you're going to be working with .NET Core. First tool to know about, of course, is the command line interface. The .NET CLI comes with the .NET Core SDK and works cross-platform, Windows, Linux, or Mac, making it ideal for using in CI environments, build systems, or even just in a dev environment when you need to quickly create a new project, build it, and get going. You can learn more about the CLI by going to docs.microsoft.com. Go to our .NET Core documentation. It'll be there under .NET Core CLI tools. I'll show a quick demo of this. If you were to type .NET help, you'll see the different commands that you can use. You can create new projects, restore packages, build, publish, run, test, and so on. You also can manage the project by adding or removing dependencies using the .NET CLI. So let's do a .NET new. You can see the different templates we can choose. You've got a console project, a class library, some test projects, and some various ASP.NET Core projects. For this demo, I will do a .NET new MVC. So that's going to create a new ASP.NET Core MVC web app in this directory. So if I take a look, you can see I've got my source, some configuration, and then the CS proj file itself. We can take a quick look at that. You'll notice it's much smaller than CS proj files have been in the past. We've made a real concerted effort to make this more human readable, since these sorts of files might be used outside of Visual Studio now, where they have to be edited directly by a person rather than by a tool. And so it's really slimmed down. It's just the target framework and then the references. These are all NuGet packages that are required for ASP.NET Core. As I said, you can use the command line tool, the command line interface, to manage those dependencies. So I can do a .NET add to add either a package reference or a reference to another CS proj file. In this case, maybe we'll add, we'll say newtonsoft.json because that's a very popular package. So that if we take a look at our project file again, you can see it's added it for us. That's sort of like the equivalent of an npm install-save in the Node world. So now that we've scaffolded a new project, we can do a .NET restore. This is going to download all our dependent packages from NuGet, cache them locally, and make them available to this project. If you haven't realized yet, you'll quickly discover with .NET Core, NuGet is a super important resource because so many of your dependencies are delivered as NuGet packages. Even pieces of the framework itself are delivered as NuGet packages. So now that the restore is done and our dependencies are available, we can do a .NET run. .NET run will implicitly do a .NET build if required, if that's needed, and then it will launch the app. So, okay, it says it's running now, so we can navigate out to localhost 5000, and here is our MVC app running. And just like that, we've got an app up and running with the .NET CLI. It's that easy. Now, of course, you're going to want more than just a command line interface for working with .NET Core if you do anything very complicated, because you're not just going to use Notepad. I mean, you could, but that doesn't debug for you. So there's a few editors and IDEs we need to look at. The first is Visual Studio 2017. This is the Cadillac of .NET IDEs. You can get it from visualstudio.com. You can download the free Community Edition, which is it's got pretty much all the features you're going to need, and doesn't cost anything. And you can go to Channel 9 to view some getting started videos for getting started with .NET Core and Visual Studio 2017. I'll quickly show some of its features that make it a good environment for working with .NET Core. Devenv MVC app.csproj. So when we start this up, you can see we've got our Solution Explorer over here with our source, our various dependencies, things like that. Now, actually, this dependency view is interesting, because this is one of the things that's better than just working with the CLI directly, is that we have sort of UI view of managing our NuGet packages. You can see what's installed, what needs updated, information about the packages. You can go to Browse to find new packages. You can install them from here with just one click. And that's going to be a pretty easy way to manage those dependencies that we were talking about. Similarly, you can edit the CS project directly from Visual Studio now, even without unloading the project here, which is nice. But you don't have to do that in VS. You can actually go to Properties, and you can manage a lot of the project metadata right here in the UI, which you would be familiar with if you've done .NET development in the past. That's the sort of experience that you get out of Visual Studio, is that sort of UI layer on top to make things a little more friendly. You also, of course, could add new projects to your solution. You've got all of the same .NET Core and .NET Standard templates that were available from the CLI, but you also have a whole host of other project types that Visual Studio is going to be able to scaffold for you and get you up and running with, from classic .NET Framework apps to UWP apps to Azure things. I especially like the Azure Resource Group one. This will create an ARM template for you. It makes it really easy to work with Azure Resource Manager templates, just adding and removing components. You can create Service Fabric apps. And it's not just C#, of course. You can do this with Visual Basic, C++, F#, TypeScript. And this is extensible as well. Visual Studio, if you go to Extensions and Updates, has a rich ecosystem of extensions. So you can add all sorts of functionality here beyond just what comes in the box, which is super useful. Of course, the main reason that I jumped over here instead of just using the CLI and Notepad was that I need a debugger experience, and Visual Studio has a great one. I can just hit F5 to launch my application. It's going to build it, start it up for me. So we'll give it just a minute to do that. And then once it's started, you can see we get this Diagnostic Tools window, which is unique to Visual Studio. It allows you to see memory usage, CPU usage. Different events are recorded here, which might be assemblies loading, or it might be ETW events from your application. We've got a red box, which means there was probably a first chance exception that may be worth looking at. Here it is. So we can get more information on that if it matters. And you can go back and you do like historical debugging with this, which is very cool. But you also can just do simple things like, let's say we want to set a breakpoint and know when someone has gone to, let's say, the About action. Set this here. You can see that Visual Studio has launched our app for us. Now if I click on About, we break. You can see all of the locals. You can see and you can edit all of the locals. You've got your call stack, an immediate window for running commands, evaluating functions as needed. There's settings for what you want to do on different types of exceptions, whether you want to break on first chance, second chance, etc. And this is sort of that rich debugging experience that I was talking about in VS. In addition to that, we integrate with a lot of other services, which are easy to use from Visual Studio. You can right-click here and say Publish, and this will publish my web app out to Azure. I can publish it as an Azure App Service. Can do it onto an Azure virtual machine, or I can just publish into a folder or to IIS, so you don't have to use Azure. If you are using Azure, though, as a cloud solution, we've got the Cloud Explorer built into Visual Studio, so you can manage a lot of your Azure assets directly from VS. I can see my virtual machines here. I can start them, stop them, go out to the portal and view them. From here, you got your VM scale sets where you can do something similar. You also can even update the diagnostics extension in VS, which is pretty useful for turning diagnostics on and off in a VM scale set. You can view your app services. From here, you can attach a debugger, so you can debug your web app running in the cloud from Visual Studio. You can view the logs, opening Kudu, go to the portal. You can download the publish profile so you know how to publish an app up to this particular app service. So all of this cloud management is available here. You've also got the Test Explorer. Now, this doesn't have anything in it because I don't have any unit tests in this solution. But if I did have a unit test project, all of the tests would show up. I could run or debug them from here. I could see output from when they ran last down below. They'd all be color-coded red or green depending on whether they passed or failed. So you can manage all of your testing in Visual Studio as well. And that's not to even mention the coding experience itself. You'll notice if I have some sort of syntax error here, before I even build the app, I'm getting a little red squiggle telling me something's wrong. You can see these using statements are grayed out, and I get a little light bulb when I hover over them or when I go to that line. And clicking on that light bulb will help me fix the problem. So here it says, oh, these are unnecessary. They're not used. Great. It removes them for me. This is all done with Roslyn running in the background, continually compiling your app, analyzing it, looking for things that are wrong so you can fix them on the fly. Makes the whole build, debug, fix cycle that much faster. Also, as you're doing this, you've got the error list below that will summarize errors, warnings, messages from all your different projects so that you can view them here and filter them and work with them in that way. Another cool thing that I haven't shown yet is that you can add Docker support to a .NET Core project by just right-clicking and saying Add Docker Support. And I won't do it now because I've got a whole other video dedicated to that, which you can go check out, but it adds a Docker file, Docker Compose, and Visual Studio will actually then allow you to debug your application running inside of a Docker container so that you can debug stuff that maybe only happens when it's running in that environment. You do that all through Visual Studio. And, okay, we'll go ahead and save the solution file it created for us. That's fine. So that's Visual Studio 2017. Now there is Visual Studio 2015, but you'll want 2017 to get the good project system support. There's also Visual Studio for Mac, which is our Mac IDE. It's an evolution of Xamarin Studio. You go to visualstudio.com/vs Visual Studio Mac to get this one. It gives you a similar good build debug experience for .NET Core, Mono, and Xamarin apps on a Mac. So if you're working on those sorts of cross-platform solutions from a Mac dev machine, this is something you should check out. Like Visual Studio 2017, we have some Channel 9 videos to get you up and running with this. channel9.msdn.com, Events Connect 2016. We've just got some videos from past connects that will show you how to get started. And then there's Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code's a little bit different because whereas the others were these fat IDEs with a lot of features, this is a slim, super fast, cross-platform portable code editor, which also has extensions to allow you to debug and do a lot of sort of the necessary dev tasks. So you got to code.visualstudio.com to download VS Code. And of course, we've also got Channel 9 videos on getting started with this. Because it's cross-platform, you can do this on Linux, Mac, or Windows, and the experience is going to be the same everywhere. Let me go ahead and show that one off real quick. If I open up my project with code, you can see it starts up super fast, and I can do the editing here. It notices that it doesn't have the config file it needs to debug, so I'll say yes, and it will add that. Visual Studio Code requires you to have a launch.json telling it how to launch these things because it supports lots of different languages, but primarily through extensions. So I need to say this is a .NET Core project. Here's the program to launch. Here's the working directory. And this all just came out of a template, and it's correct right out of the box. So with that added, I can hit F5, and I can get a debugging experience here that's going to be cross-platform using VS Code. So here's our app. We'll go ahead and make this a little smaller. As with Visual Studio, you're able to come in here. You can set breakpoints. Let me go into my home controller. We'll set a breakpoint on the contact API there. Come back over to our debugger tab. And then if we hit contact, we stop on the breakpoint. Again, you've got your locals, a watch window, the debug console there. You can change how you break on exceptions. Here's the call stack. And so you get a lot of the same debugging experience for the core debugging things that you're going to need to do in VS Code in a cross-platform way. VS Code also pretty nice. It has a built-in terminal, which will allow you to work directly from inside of VS Code without having to switch windows. You can configure this to be Bash if you have the Linux subsystem for Windows installed. It can be a command prompt. It can be PowerShell. You just use Control tilde to toggle that. And then I've mentioned the extensions. There are so many extensions for VS Code, which can really enable it to be an editor and a debugger for about any programming language you want. You can work with Node, C#, Go, Python, C++. There's extensions for all of those and many more. So you should search the marketplace. You'll also find snippets for things like Docker files, Bootstrap, Angular, Jenkins files. Really, whatever you're working in, there's likely some sort of extension that's going to make VS Code a nice editing experience and possibly even a debugger for that workflow. There's also a lot of useful keyboard shortcuts that make this a very productive environment. You can do like Control P to navigate to a file by name. You can do Control T to navigate to a symbol. Maybe I'll go over to my home controller type. So Control P, Control T are useful. There's a whole slew of those that are worth learning to really just make it a super productive environment. And then you can see also we integrate with Git. So I'm not in a Git repository, but I can quickly click this to initialize one. And then right from this tool, the same way that you've got a terminal, you've got a built-in little UI for doing things like committing your code, pushing, etc. So it makes it super easy to work in. So those are kind of the IDEs and editors worth knowing about. Beyond those, I'll sort of quickly go through just a few other tools that are worth being aware of. First is the API Portability Analyzer. You can get this if you go out to github.com/Microsoft/.NET API port. And this is a tool that will analyze a binary and see which .NET Framework APIs it's using. It will then generate a report letting you know which .NET platforms those APIs are available on. So this is very useful if you're taking a .NET Framework library and migrating it to work as a .NET Standard library. This is where you want to start for that sort of process because it will help you understand which of the APIs your library is depending on are or are not available on different versions of .NET Standard. That's available as a command line tool, which is really easy to run and use, or as a VS extension that will analyze the projects that you load in Visual Studio. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. There's also some useful reference sites like APIs of .NET, where you can go out and you can search for different .NET APIs and see sort of where they're available, how often they're used. So let's suppose that we're interested in, let's see, someone was just asking me about Triple Des Crypto, Triple Des Crypto Service Provider and whether it was available in .NET Standard or not. If I click here, it shows me this type. Here are the platforms it's available on. So I can see it is in fact available on .NET Core and .NET Standard 2.0, which are now in preview, but it's not available in the 1.x versions. It's pretty much always been available in .NET Framework, except maybe in 1.0, and it's available cross-platform on Mono or on Xamarin for mobile. So if you're considering using an API, this is a way to see where it can be used. You can also see the different members and usage information of how commonly it's used. ICANN-has.NET is not as useful as it used to be. It gives an overview of which popular NuGet packages work on .NET Standard and .NET Core. And with so many of the popular NuGet packages being available there, especially with .NET Standard 2.0, I find this isn't as necessary, but every now and then it's still useful to know about as a reference site. And then finally, some other miscellaneous tools. If you're working with binaries that maybe you don't have the source for, ILDASM and ILSpy are tools for just sort of inspecting the IL, or with ILSpy a higher level C# abstraction they're worth knowing about. There's the NuGet Package Explorer, because NuGet packages are so prevalent with the .NET Core workflows. This will allow you to see sort of what's inside the packages. They're just zip files renamed, but this makes it you don't have to rename them and open the archive. You can just sort of view them immediately in a friendly UI. And then if you're doing ASP.NET Core work specifically, you'll probably want some web-specific tools, something like Postman or a Swashbuckle-generated Swagger front end for testing out your API. And then you can use something like Fiddler to watch traffic to see incoming requests and outgoing responses, which can be really useful for .NET Core debugging if you're using it in the context of ASP.NET Core. Here's just sort of a collection of the links I've had in these slides, and I can post these slides down in the comments. But hopefully this has been a useful introduction to .NET Core and some of the tools that you're going to be using as you get started with it.